Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, listeners. Thank you for being here for this week's episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, your hostess, and most of you know me as Life Coach Maureen. I'm really happy that you're all here. As always, I bring you the most fabulous guests on the planet. And today's no exception. And it's fantastic that I was just telling her off air that I try to bring you all aspects of all situations in life that we could experience. And so we went from a guest who was talking about testing positive for the BRCA gene to now my guest who went through the whole process in treatment of breast cancer, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So today I'm talking with Katie Snyder, and she was one of the first women undergraduates at Yale. Yes, she's a brilliant mind. After a PhD and a 40-year career as a clinical psychologist, she's retired. I always say tired and retired. During that career, she married, had 2 children, 2 grandchildren, 3 dogs, whoop, whoop, 5 cats, and many adventures, swimming with whale sharks, multiple safaris, gorilla treks, snorkeling through underground rivers. Oh my gosh, she's my hero. The next adventure was discovering a golf ball in her breast 3 months into COVID lockdown. And with all the treatment that entailed, her most recent adventure has been less rugged, but more hair-raising. She's trying to find a publisher for her book, What to Expect When You're Expecting Breast Cancer. Welcome, our new friend, Katie. How are you?
I'm great, and it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
The thing I love most about doing I Never Knew is that we give hope. This is the whole point of everything, of why I wanted to do it, what my purpose is we've all been in a situation and felt alone and isolated and scared and helpless and uninformed. And the beauty of you being here with us is that you're brave enough to say, I went through this, but I want to make sure I'm paying this forward to help someone that doesn't have the information that I didn't have. So as we start off, we talk about your knee story, and it sounds like finding that golf ball tumor was a knee story for you, where you were at your knees saying, oh my gosh, this seems like it could be obviously the worst thing in my life. So talk to us about how that happened and what that felt like for you.
Well, I have to start by saying that I have very, very large breasts. They're size 32 HH, which sounds fake, but it's an actual size. Wow. And they're very dense and very lumpy. So trying to do self-checks was almost impossible. And I had already not had it for a year when the lockdown started. And so I talked to my very close friend, who happens to be a breast cancer researcher and surgeon, who said, you have to examine yourself now. So I did. I examined myself in the shower, and I found a golf ball in my right breast. Even I could not miss it. I actually had one friend who said, only you have breasts large enough to hide a golf ball. So I thought, all right, this doesn't feel right. I couldn't find a golf ball in my other breast. So I ran out of the shower. It was late at night. I ran into the bedroom. I woke my husband up And I said, feel my breast. So he said, yes, I do feel something there. So I called my friend, and around midnight, we finally connected. And she said, okay, you've got to have an ultrasound. This could be a cyst, but that's kind of large. So let's check it out. And I think my body knew that, even though she wanted me to hope it was the cyst, my body knew better. I was really full of adrenaline and I was shaking, and that did not stop just because she said, let's hope it's a cyst.
Wow.
So
intuition, right?
Yeah, that's how it got started.
Wow. So,
and I did ultimately name the golf ball Tilly. So she does have a name.
I love that you're like, we're going to be friends and we're going to figure out how to get rid of you. You can be my friend outside of my body, but not inside of my body. So
yeah,
I love, and listeners, you're going to see as we go along, her humor really, it just shines through. And I think humor is so healing and helps us to really lighten up. I'm one of these awkward people that I'll make a joke at a funeral because I like to lighten things up, and I feel that connection with you, with your humor. So when you get this moment, I mean, of course your mind goes crazy. Anyone who's had a cancer scare, anyone, whether it's, I've had skin cancer and I've had cervical cancer scares, and so when you're getting ready and you're going in for that ultrasound, how's the anxiety level, and how is your mind preparing for the what ifs?
Well, I wasn't really preparing for what ifs. I knew that I was going to get great care because I knew that my friend knew everybody in the local medical community, actually international medical community. And so I was pretty sure she was going to walk me through this. I did discover that you can't just run in and say, okay, give me an ultrasound. The first thing they do is a mammogram because they want to see if there are any other surprises, either in the other breast or in the same breast, and there weren't. Then they send you for an ultrasound, and so they literally just go boom, 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 one, and then they walk me to the other. And then in the ultrasound, you want it to be solid, which would be, or rather, you don't want it to be solid. That would be a yikes. If it's filled with fluid, that's a phew. Same thing, you want it to be smooth, that would be a few. But if it's jagged, that would be a yikes. I got a double yikes. So the next thing they do is they literally walk you down to a fine needle aspiration. And that's where they stick a long needle in to try and extract some cells. And so in between the ultrasound and the fine needle aspiration, I was madly texting everybody, uh-oh, bad news, I'll keep you updated. And through the process of doing that, I saw, okay, if this is really cancer, which it's looking pretty sure it is, I am going to have to find a better way than texting everybody, because that's too many people. I don't want to have to do this every day. So what I ended up doing is making a list of everybody that I knew would want to be updated and just sending out an email blast to my whole posse every time. And I would often get right back from the hospital and write down everything that had happened in really, really very granular detail, because I wanted to be able to remember. And for me, that is part of living a full life, is to remember everything. And I want to remember the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I didn't want to have to say to myself later, well, now, did this happen before that? Or did that happen before this? So, but I also realized it might be really difficult for people who cared about me to read. So I would try to make it entertaining. So there's an old comic writer named Irma Bombeck, and she would just write a column at a time. I tried to make it like Irma Bombeck does cancer. And it's actually not hard to do because, well, first of all, it helps not to have a filter. So just don't filter anything. And the other thing is, everyone always has little secret thoughts, but nobody says them out loud. Well, if you say them out loud, it's pretty sure to be funny because nobody expects you to say things like that. So I just said everything out loud, no filter, sent it out. And if there was a time where my funny bone was broken, I could usually just wait overnight to send it out. And by that time, I'd have enough distance to have mended my funny bone and send it out again.
I see myself so much in you. I love that about you because I feel like knowledge is power. And sometimes, and you know, from being in the psychology field for 40 years, sometimes it's easier to stay in the rational mind, you know, just stay in the facts so you don't have to go over to the emotional side. And I feel like that was a really big coping mechanism for you. And if I was a part of your posse, I would have loved it, but I was in the medical field for 30 years myself. So some people don't like all those details. My sister's kind of a bury your head in the sand kind of person. They don't want to know all that stuff, but you know, that's what makes us all different. And I love that. So your next steps, as you go in, you get the biopsy, what happens when you find out the results?
Well, the next thing that happened was that they had me sign up for a study, or at least they started informing me about studies. I got a breast MRI, and I've had MRIs before, but I don't think I had ever really paid attention because it was, I've got a pain here, or, ow, I hurt my ankle, you know, that kind of thing. So I'd never had a breast MRI. And so I described it in really great detail. So for anybody who hasn't had a breast MRI, there is a great big donut that's a vertical donut. It's got a hole for your body to go into. They lay you on your stomach on a table. It's kind of like a massage table. They've even got a massage loop for you to put your face through, and it's padded just like a massage table. And so all these fears that people have, and including me, about, am I going to be claustrophobic? We're like, no, I'm just getting an odd massage. So there's no need to be claustrophobic. And there are two holes. Actually, it's like one big hole with a bar in between, right where your breasts go, so they can dangle down unimpeded. Wow. So my breasts are dangling down, and then they start backing you up into the hole. And it's just like, for any of you who've ever been to Disneyland or Disney World, remember the Matterhorn ride where it starts going, there's kind of a machine sound, and it's a little jerky. It's not a smooth ride. So they're basically backing me up like the Matterhorn into this machine. And then the sound effects start. And it's just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Remember, there's all these, towards the end, all these teeny weeny little spaceships, and they're really fast, like machine gun fast, very high pitched sounds. And then the mothership arrives, and it's this long, loud bass. And so afterwards I asked, why do you have all these sound effects? Why are they all different? Some of it sounded like a truck backing up. Like, you know how they go beep, 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 beep. So it's a little more alto. So we've got soprano, alto, and bass. And they said, well, it has to go through different kinds of tissue. So that's the explanation for those different things. And the whole thing takes about 45 minutes. And the first half hour or so is done without contrast. And I was told, don't really breathe while you're getting the scans. But I never knew when the scans were happening. So I was basically taking little sips of air for half an hour. And then they said, okay, now we're going to start the contrast. And they had already initially put an IV catheter into my arm, but they hadn't, it wasn't attached to anything. As I was walking into the room, it's just kind of dangling around. And then when they lay you on your stomach and arrange you, they put a shower cap on your head so stray hairs won't tickle you. They ask you what kind of music you want to listen to. This is definitely a massage experience. And but I didn't know that while they were arranging me, they had actually attached the catheter to something. So when they said, okay, now we're going to start the contrast, all of a sudden I felt cold flow into my arm. That was very brief. But this time they'd say, okay, now we're going to do a 9-minute scan. So they don't make you hold your breath the whole 9 minutes, thank God. But they do ask you to just breathe shallowly, and then they'll tell you when you can take a deep breath again. And then it was all over. So there's another 5-minute scan, and then they do the Matterhorn in reverse, and the MRI is done. So that's kind of the gold standard for finding any other small lesions. There weren't any. It was just my golf ball, Tilly, and me. And so then there's a series of things you go through. They do a core biopsy, which takes a larger sample so that they can get all the markers. They can know, is it progesterone positive? Is it estrogen positive? I had what's called triple negative. So just a word about the core biopsy, because that's what followed the MRI. I knew it would be a bigger needle, but I didn't realize that picture a long fat needle where the last 3/4 of an inch is a flat piece that's extending out the end of the barrel of the needle. And then they come at you sideways. So, because it's a really long needle. And then there's a click, and the bolt, like a piece of a similar length, shoots out of the end of the barrel of the needle. It's curved just enough to form kind of a cylinder, like a vegetable peeler. So basically, the core biopsy needle is the tiny love child of an apple core and a vegetable peeler shot by a crossbow.
Oh, God.
And they take 5 samples, but they numb you up first. So you really just feel pressure as it goes through me and into Tilly. All I felt was some pressure. They took 5 samples, and that's how they found out that I was triple negative. And it's called triple negative because it doesn't have any of the other markers. So I do want to say that for those of you listening, that most people don't go through the amount of treatment that I had. Most people can just get surgery and maybe a little radiation because they have all kinds of miracle drugs now to treat, HER2 positive and all the other kinds of cancers. It's just triple negative that they really need to bring out the big guns for.
Right.
So,
and being how big Tilly was, it's kind of a miracle it didn't metastasize, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she was just shy of moving into the next category. She was still a stage 2, but if she'd been just a hair bigger, she would have been a stage 3.
Wow.
So
it didn't have a lot to do with hormones. Was there a genetic factor? Did anyone in your family history have any of that?
They did genetic testing on me, and I didn't have any of the variations that are known to cause breast cancer.
Wow.
I did have 2 what they call VUS, variation of unknown significance, which I immediately labeled an SUV. And so I had 2 unknown SUVs, VUSs, but they don't know. So there's no indication that it had any genetic significance or a genetic cause.
Wow, that is so incredible to me because and they say there's a lot of factors that can cause stuff, but they have such a tie to the genetic thing. And I was talking to the other guest who tested positive for the BRCA, and I said, well, my my gynecologist always says, because I have a family history of breast cancer of people under 50, I have this really big risk. And she said, no, Maureen, that's a myth. She said, it is not specifically genetic that causes this. So you just completely validated that for us, that it came just out of nowhere, really, that we don't know, right? They don't have a known reason why this happened.
Yeah. And even really everything had an element of humor in it, because even getting the genetic test, they wanted to get it done fairly quickly. So they sent a phlebotomist to my house. But they couldn't come inside because COVID. So I'm actually getting blood drawn in my backyard. It's like, are the neighbors watching? What do they think is going on here?
Thinking about the fact that it was during COVID, just everything had to be so completely different. And then how was that having support? Because was your husband allowed to come with you to these things, or you were just going
Nobody
through this
was
alone?
allowed. No one was allowed. However, I actually regard that as a blessing in disguise. And the reason I regarded it that way, and which, by the way, it's not true anymore. People can now, it's enough, COVID is enough over that people can have their loved ones or friends accompany them both to doctor's appointments and to chemotherapy. Nice. So that phase is over. But my husband would have been bored out of his mind. Oh my God, I would go there, and it was a very long day. So, part of why I like describing this is people really have no idea what it's like. And if you know what it's like, then you don't have to be scared when you first go in. And so they would start every day with a blood test, or every hospital day with a blood test to make sure that I was healthy enough to be poisoned for chemotherapy. Right. They started with chemotherapy. And they did it for two reasons. One was because if they could see which chemotherapy worked on Tilly, then if I ever got the sequel, The Return of Tilly, they would know what worked and use it again. And the other is with what they call neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which just means that's happening before you get the surgery. They also could shrink her, so that by the time they were taking her out, she was much, much smaller, a vastly diminished Tilly. At this point, by the time they took her out, she was the size of a grape.
Wow, interesting. That's really interesting. How bad was chemo? Because I know that's everyone's kind of fear. You lose your hair, you're very sick. How did you react to chemo?
It sounds funny to say it wasn't bad, but it doesn't hurt when they do it. So first of all, I have to say, when you're going to get the big guns of chemotherapy, which is what they planned for me, you have to get what's called a port first. And the reason for the port is so that instead of having to do the chemotherapy in through the veins of your arm every time, which means it would poke, it would be in there for hours, that would probably hurt, and the chemotherapy might do some damage to the surrounding area. So they implant a port in your chest, a couple inches below your collarbone on the opposite side of wherever you have your tumor. So in my case, Tilly was on the right, so the port was on the left, which meant that's my port side. I am nautically correct, because that's the left side is the port side in both senses of the word. And I had imagined the port sticking out of my skin like a spigot, like, to attach your backyard hose. It's not actually like that. What they do is they implant a little plastic button. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's like a hollow plastic button. It's maybe 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch tall, maybe 3/4 of an inch in diameter. It's completely inserted under the skin. So you just have like one little seam in your skin. They attach a catheter to it. They actually also do a small incision in your jugular. So the catheter goes up from the port, makes a U-turn, like a cobra sort of, goes back down close to your heart so that it's in a big vein instead of a little arm vein. And it's close to your heart because that way it distributes the chemotherapy faster. So all of this was a prelude to even doing the chemotherapy. And because I have heavy breasts, and I was afraid that the weight of my breast was going to like dislodge the stitches or something. I was constantly trying to shower without having the water go on the little seam and holding my breast with one hand and washing myself with the other. I was like doing gymnastics in the shower. So I finally called the nurse and said, do I have to do this? And won't it hurt? Because because I was wearing a brassiere all the time to support the breast. And she said, look, just start by not wearing it for 5 minutes at a time, let it stretch out a little, and then put the brassiere back on and then do it again. So I was doing it in small doses, and eventually everything healed up great. You can't even see a scar there anymore. Anyway, so that's how it starts. You get that. They give you 10 days or so to let it heal. And then they start the chemo. And chemo is, as I said, first you get a blood test to make sure you're healthy enough to get it. Then you meet with the oncologist. Then you go back to the infusion center. And I was using, this is going to sound like another digression, but it's all part of the chemotherapy story. I was using a cold cap. So a cold cap makes your scalp really cold so that the chemotherapy doesn't get to the follicles as much because it's slowed down. So it's actually a way of preserving hair. And I'm going to give a little shout out to the company. Hair to Stay is a nonprofit. And what they do is they subsidize cold caps for people who can't afford it. And they were just lovely. So I had initially imagined that a cold cap was going to be like wearing a shower cap full of ice. I thought, oh my God, am I going to have to bring a cooler with me? Do I have to drag a whole cooler full of ice into the chemotherapy center? How does this work? But
and right next to your lunch, and then you have your cap and your, you were going to go prepared.
I was prepared. I actually felt like I was Ernest Shackleton preparing for a polar expedition. In fact, I had lists of which clothing I was going to have and what I was going to wear and extra copies of everything. I had my cold cap materials because they send you a whole little carrying case that's got the cold cap and a little helmet to put over it and thing to put like a hairband to protect your ears from getting frostbite and a little spray bottle to wet down your hair so it's easier to make it cold, which also of course makes you cold. So it's kind of like having a popsicle head.
Yeah.
And what they do is they attach a tube to the bottom of this helmet and you sit next to a room size, well, I call it an air conditioner because that's sort of what it looked like. It's a room size air conditioner sitting right next to me on the floor. No, it's on the floor. I'm not. I'm in a lounger. And in fact, I'm in a heated lounger. Yay. And nice. When they attach these tubes to your head, you look like one of those Star Wars creatures that have the fleshy tubes hanging off their head. And when you're attached to this machine, it chills the gel down to 37 degrees Fahrenheit. And now you're attached to that thing as well as being attached to the chemotherapy pole. So they get you ready. They squirt they have their tech squirts your hair down, gets you all suited up. I also had brought cold booties and cold mitts because there's some evidence that it also prevents or reduces peripheral neuropathy in your hands and feet if you're getting the kind of chemo that causes that. So I was definitely not just popsicle head, popsicle hands, popsicle feet. And in planning all of this, I thought, oh, if I am going to be there for hours getting this done, how am I going to read if I'm bringing my Kindle and but my hands are popsicles? I can't turn the pages on the Kindle. So I had to buy a stylus and practice before I got the cold mitts. They're sort of like oven mitts. So I'm practicing using the stylus with oven mitts to make sure I can actually turn the pages on my Kindle.
But I was going to say, I saw a video the other day of a little girl on TikTok, and she had the stylus in her mouth, and her mom was like, watch this. She was flipping everything with the stylus in her mouth. So that could have been an option, but you did well practicing.
Well, it wouldn't have been an option for my mouth because I couldn't move my head around that much.
True.
But all of this was an answer to why was I glad I didn't have my husband there? Yeah. Because he's one of those guys that's like, give him a machine and he knows what makes it work. But give him a human body, and as far as he is concerned, it is a black box with squishy side. So he would have had to be there all day doing nothing, because when you are about to start chemotherapy, at the same time that they start cooling your head down, if you're going to be getting the cold cap, they also start pre-medicating you. So they put in the IV into your port, and they start giving you prednisone and Benadryl and all sorts of anti-nausea things. The Benadryl is actually an anti-nausea drug. They give you others too, but who knew? I had no idea. I thought of Benadryl as, if you're going to have an anaphylactic reaction or something.
Right.
And they do have the nurses standing by in case you have an anaphylactic reaction. But basically, for the first half hour, all that happens is the Benadryl completely conked me out, because IV Benadryl is like getting a sleeping potion. So
ideal. That's ideal to just, the more relaxed you are, I'm certain that your body works so much better with the medications, chemo, all of that.
So can you imagine having somebody sit there for hours? You can't chat with them. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to see. The dog's at home. We didn't want to leave. I mean, even if it hadn't been COVID, I wouldn't have wanted to leave her alone for too long. And in fact, during the time that I was getting chemotherapy, she went into heat for the first time. And we had promised the breeder that it's better for large dogs' joints if they can go through one heat before they get spayed, because it gives time for the bones to knit properly. So they're less likely to get dysplasia. So we were trying, she was providing the comic relief. We were trying to figure out, all right, what are we going to do now? And so the first thing I did was I had bought some Depends because of an unfortunate accident in the hospital, trying to get myself disattached from the cold cap, drag my pole to the bathroom, because they're filling you so full of IV fluids and you're sitting there for hours. You really, really, really have to pee. And I really, really didn't want to bother the nurses. So I held it as long as I could. Ladies, don't do that. It's a bad idea. So luckily, I was wearing a tunic that covered the accident, so it wasn't as embarrassing as it could have been. But, and you have to reattach yourself within 7 minutes for the cold cap. So I had to race down the hall and get back and get attached again. It's like some really weird kids game, where they give you like a relay race. So this was the relay race.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so meanwhile, so I had bought some Depends. And so we just cut a hole in the Depends and stuck her tail through it and put that on her. But she was trailing little grains of the desiccant everywhere she went. So that wasn't a great solution. So then we tried to buy some equivalent of disposable diapers for doggies. And we bought one that was supposed to be for a 75-pound dog. And she was only 40 pounds at that point.
Yeah.
So we thought, oh, this will fit for sure. It was so small. It kept slipping down her haunches, kind of like, remember the days of pantyhose? And if you didn't pull it up enough, it would slip down. So now you're like trying to walk and the crotch of the pantyhose is down between your thighs. So it was like that. So we thought, okay, we're just going to have to get her some actual diapers. Yeah. So we did. And in a fit of creativity, I put a disposable diaper inside one of the regular cloth diapers because I thought, I didn't think about this, but I'm going to have to wash those. And I don't want to have to wash those. So we put her disposable inside the regular diaper. We put her in her crate. My husband took me to the hospital. And by the time he got home, Miss Houdini had managed to pull the disposable out of the regular diaper and was happily chowing down on it.
Oh,
so that he found little pieces of shredded diaper all over the crate because we kept her in a crate while we were gone.
Yeah.
And so then we're nervous. Oh my gosh, did she actually eat any of this stuff? Do we need to worry? Luckily, those disposables didn't have desiccant in them because I was afraid if they had, it would like sop up her intestinal juices and cause a blockage, but it didn't. So
that's great. So he had a lot on his plate just at home with puppy, and you're over here like, please don't come. Cause I'm like you, like I just sometimes, and everybody handles health issues differently. I'm one of these, cause in my household, it was like, just deal with stuff when you were sick. So I'm like that. I just want to rest, just be taken care of. You stay over here. But I have a husband that would refuse to stay at home. He would be like a sucker fish, like right here, making sure that he was there taking care of me, bless his heart. So he's taking care of puppy. This is your very first situation with chemo. When you went home, how did you react to it? And I want to know, did it help your hair stay?
It did help my hair stay. The cold cap did.
Wow, that's amazing.
Chemo itself doesn't hurt when it's dripping in, and it actually never hurts. So, and that was news to me. I expected something to hurt. And it is true that it was toxic enough, not all of them, but the really big guns, the ones that I finally got towards the end, it took 2 nurses to do it. And they look at the computer, they look at the code on the bag, and they read it back and forth to each other like they were exchanging nuclear codes. And it's like, when you have to have 2 keys turning simultaneously in the silo before you can launch, it was kind of like that. And they put on special disposable protective cover over their regular nurses stuff so that in case it splashed on them, it would protect them from splashing. And I thought, oh my God, you don't want to be splashed and you're sticking this in me?
Yeah.
But the thing is that for that particular one, you have to have the cold cap before, during, and then for 3 hours after. So it meant that I was in the hospital for a very, very long time. It wasn't just going in, getting an hour and a half of chemo and going home. Yeah. It really, I would get there at 9 a.m, sometimes 8 a.m. And there was one night I didn't leave until like 7 p.m. or in the evening for various reasons.
Wow, that is long.
So it could take a really, really long time. And I pretty much sailed through the early chemotherapy. I never had a day of nausea. I never had a minute of nausea. Better Living Through Chemistry. It was just really miracle drugs. So I was very pleased by that. But the nurses do, before you start chemotherapy, they do what they call a chemo teach, where you have a private session with a nurse over, I don't know how they did this in non-COVID times, but mine was by Zoom. So I got a packet of instructions, and she went through every page of the instructions with me, because there are a lot of preventive things that you do. Like some people can get mouth sores from chemotherapy, but if you do a salt wash of your mouth 3 times a day, it prevents mouth sores. And I kind of felt like I always brine my Thanksgiving turkeys. So I felt like, well, this would be a lot better if I could add garlic and allspice. Can I do that? But
love that.
So you brine yourself 3 times a day. And I'm trying to remember, you wash your hair really carefully, even though I had the cold cap. You wash your hair very infrequently with special shampoos that they give you that look like very high-end shampoos. Honestly, I never used them. I just rinsed my hair with water. Yeah. And my hair, I don't think people can see this, they can just hear it, but my hair is very, very curly. And even in the pre-cancer days, when I would wash my hair, just getting the knots out of my hair would be enough to remove enough hair that I would have like a mouse-sized portion of hair on the floor of the shower. But now I couldn't do that. Hair was coming out, but it was more like the size of a baby mouse. So,
and I get it, curly girl problems. As you see, my hair is naturally curly too. And but they will see this because this is going to be on YouTube, so they get to see your lovely, beautiful self.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes, of course. We want to see. We want to see you. We want to see your beautiful face. So yeah. Okay. So that was good. That was not a big major. I think that would be so devastating for me. Is just, taking those if chunks were coming out, as you've heard people that go through chemo, I mean, it would be just insult to injury, I think, of everything that your body is going through. And you're like, can't I even be vain for a minute? Can't I just have my hair? So that's great that it didn't happen. I love the hair to stay. I'm going to shout them out on this, on your episode. We're going to put their maybe we can have donations or something. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
So I do have to say that I had an idiosyncratic reaction long after I was done with chemotherapy. They give you about a month to recover. And I do have to say, there's lots of stuff that I'm leaving out. Like they actually tried me on an immunotherapy, which I think is going to be, this is part of the study that I was in, and it is going to be the gold standard because it is just amazing in how it shrinks the tumors. But for about 1% of the people that get immunotherapy, they get inflammation. It's like inflammation of your lungs or other body parts, and it can be really bad. Most people don't even know they've had it. There aren't any side effects. I was in the 1%. So first of all, women my age don't even usually get triple negative cancer. It's a young woman's disease. So I am actually secretly a young Chinese woman. You can't tell when you look at me, but I did get, so they always tell med students, if you hear hoofbeats, don't think zebras, think horses. Common things are seen commonly. So I was already a zebra, and I managed to get through even the AC, which is adriamycin and cytoxan. Adriamycin is also known as doxorubicon. It's It is, they call it the red devil because it's so powerful. And it looks red too. It's like getting sort of cherry cough syrup, plus you pee red.
Ooh.
So
Ooh,
not
that's scary.
permanently, just for a couple of days. But you already know it's going to happen. So you look in there like, yup, red pee.
Oh,
okie dokie.
I remember the stuff they used to give us for urinary tract infections, and it was orange.
Yes.
Remember when you pee orange? That's what it just reminded me of.
Exactly. Yes. So, although that lasts as long as you're taking the medication, this lasts a couple of days and then it goes away.
Okay.
So, which is good.
Yeah.
And the AC, which I always thought of as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because she had just sort of started getting well known there, or air conditioning. And I can never hear, even now I hear AC and I think air conditioning, but it's not. So that was the one chemo. I had to stop early in the immunotherapy, but which most people won't. But then after that, I did the AC. And that's the one that, again, while you're getting it, you don't feel anything. But cumulatively, you do. Because it makes you fatigued, it makes you weak. They do tell you to hydrate, which prevents side effects. I'm not sure which ones, but it supposedly does. And they also tell you to exercise even when you feel exhausted. So one of the things that one of my friends did, who lived a few blocks away from me, was every morning she would walk over to my house at 9 a.m, ring the doorbell, we'd both mask up, and she would take me for a walk around the block. I usually couldn't do more than 15 minutes. But, people often say, what can we do to be helpful? Actually, the people who aren't helpful say, let me know if you need anything. Okay, don't do that. That's not helpful. What is helpful if somebody says, do you need food? Do you need this? Do you need that? Tell me what you need. And people also got very, very creative about what they sent me. So one friend organized a food train. One person, actually 2 people, sent me blankets. And because I was cold all the time.
Yeah.
So especially if this is in the winter, and unless you have an overheated home, at least I was just always cold. And so one blanket in particular was not one that I would ever have bought for myself, because it was very lightweight, synthetic, with one of those synthetic fleece on the underside. It was perfect. And the reason it was perfect is that I was weak. I couldn't even heft a Pyrex cup that had 2 cups of pancake batter in it. I was so weak, I had to use 2 hands. And so trying to arrange a blanket over myself when I was sitting on the couch was difficult. And so this perfect blanket actually matched my living room colors. And so I could sit on the couch and be color coordinated and still deal with the blanket. It was perfect.
So thoughtful. I love creativity, and my love language is receiving gifts. So I'm the same way when it comes to giving and just being creative. And you always think, listeners, this is a good way. I love that she's saying this part, because we feel so helpless when people are going through something. But put yourself in their shoes and think, what are the things of comfort that you would want? And it sounds like your friends, your troop, your tribe was amazing during this time for you. I love that.
They totally were. So I had another friend who lived out of town who sent me pajamas.
Yep.
Because I was lounging around the house. It's not like I asked for pajamas. I didn't ask for the blankets either. I didn't know to think of them, but my friends thought of them. Several people sent me beanies. Oh my God. One person sent me like 20 beanies. So I could try them on and see, okay, I like this fabric. I don't like that fabric. This style's not that flattering. I won't use this one.
I probably, if I was in your tribe, would have sent you like the big giant bows for the newborns, that they put on the newborns. And I would have been like, that's my sense of humor. I would have been like, here's a big giant bow. Whether you lose your hair or don't lose your hair, like I want you to just, shine in this big giant flower or bow and make you giggle. So that's really thoughtful that your friends did that. I love that. And as we have a few minutes left, I want to ask you, and this is an interesting question because you and I, being in the mental health field, I was in the medical field to begin with, started in nursing. I have opinions about the medical field. In these cases of cancer, I think there are, at this point in time, things that only medications can do, pharmaceuticals can do. Do you believe there were other, because we've heard of people who have cancer who will go this sort of naturopathic route with the naturopathic doctors or homeopathic. What do you think? Do you think it's a combination that works? Do you think homeopathic exclusively would work? What's your opinion on the being able to take care of ourselves homeopathically or medically or pharmaceutically?
Well, first of all, I should say it's probably, if you have a PhD, it's probably against the law not to believe in science.
Yeah.
So I am a big believer in medical science. I would never do naturopathic treatment as the primary treatment.
Yeah.
However, for side effects, I think try everything.
Yeah.
So a really good example of that, actually, probably my only example of that, is that I got, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on it. It's when your tongue gets all white and furry.
Thrush.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I got thrush as a result of the chemotherapy. And I tried every medication that I was prescribed and nothing worked for the thrush. So my friend, this internationally known breast cancer researcher, started researching thrush and sent me 2 jars of solid virgin coconut oil. She said, melt them, try them on your tongue. They worked better than anything else.
Yes.
So
I love that you said exactly the way I think we can marry the two. I think that's fantastic. I think there are things that only pharmaceuticals and science have the answers to. But I agree with you that I think there are other ways, naturopathic. I think gastro stuff, we can really do a lot more naturopathic. And I don't mean to sidebar on that. But guys, we have a few more moments left. And I want Katie to give us her final thought, and then we're going to do our segment. The way to get a hold of her, to get her book and pre-order it, there is a very long address that I'm going to put on the episode, so we don't have to worry about giving a website or anything for Katie. So to wrap it up, tell us, excuse me, tell us the one thing that you never knew that you know now, that if I came to you today and said, oh my gosh, Katie, I just got diagnosed with breast cancer, what would you tell me today that you went through?
Well, I think what I would do would be not one thing. It would be to tell you in detail, if you wanted to know, what kinds of things to expect. Mm-hmm. Just because when you know the details, for me, knowledge forewarned is forearmed, so to speak. And little things that I was very scared of, turned out I didn't need to be scared of. Like when you're getting radiation treatment, they actually give you tattoos. And I was so scared that it was going to hurt. But it wasn't. It was like somebody pricked you with a pin for 1 second in 5 spots so they could line you up properly. And so as what I would do is I would tell them, okay, now you're going to have this procedure. Here's what they do. They do this, 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 and this. And I would tell them in excruciating detail so that they would know exactly what to expect. And since I would do it, there'd probably be at least one part where they would giggle. I think it would both demystify it and also reduce fear, reduce pain, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Of course, some of us have like a flight response, so I don't want to know a lot of stuff when it's hard. So I'm more like, don't give me any details. I don't want to think about it. So I know a lot of us have different ways of dealing with difficult news, medical bad news, and really having meditation, I feel, and mindfulness is really important to just keep us in acceptance and peace, and just whatever happens, we go with the flow and have a sense of humor, like Katie. I just think you're just fantastic. I can't wait for your book to come out. I think it's such a great tool and resource, and uplifting sense of humor. I think that people need that when they're in those moments of crisis. So as we wrap up, I have one question, and it's called, I forgot what the segment was called. It's called, oh, please do. So it is, what is the best thing that someone has ever said to you, the best quote, the best phrase, the best advice that you've ever received?
Well, to me, the best thing anybody can say to me is, I love you.
See, what a great way to end. That's it. Love heals everything, in my opinion. And I found one today that I really liked when I thought of speaking with you on the podcast. And because you're such an uplifter and overcomer, and just, I don't even like survivor. You're not a survivor. You're just a thriver who got through it and shares her experience. So I saw this saying, defeat is not bitter unless you swallow it. And that was by Joe Clark. And I really love that.
Well, there's also a quote from Hamlet. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you so much, listeners. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got a lot of information, and whether you're faced with a cancer diagnosis or someone in your family is, we hope that never to be true, but reach out to Katie, read her book, and whether it's breast cancer or prostate cancer or cervical cancer, there's so many cancers out there. The experience, I'm certain, is pretty similar, and I wish everyone health and just continued health for you, Katie. And thank you for the hour of your time that you gave our listeners today.
It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Me too. You're such a light. And I'm so happy you crossed my path. So listeners, that's it for this week. I love you all for listening. As Katie said, the 3 best words we can say is I love you. And that's how I feel about you. And thank you for spreading the word about the podcast, sharing and building this community, because every week we have new topics that someone needs. Someone needs to hear it, or you hear it and you share that with someone. That's being the difference we want to see in the world. And so thank you all for being here. Continue with those 5-star reviews. I'm so grateful for that. And don't forget, I'm available for life coaching, relationship coaching, dating coaching at lifecoachmaureen.com. Also my books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, Outskirts Press. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. And I have a big announcement coming soon about another book that is in the process of publishing right now. So excited about that. And don't forget our dog boutique, healthy, holistic treats and lickable paw bombs, as well as shampoo bars that have no preservatives, no additives, no anything bad for your puppies as well as apparel and fun items at mydogiseverything.net. So love you all. Until next week, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Most of all, please take care of those furry babies, and let's make sure we adopt and don't shop. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.